Thinking back to when I was a kid, the thing that kept me up at night wasn't monsters under the bed, it was nuclear war.
Oh, yeah.
I vividly remember the drills, the talk about shelters, even those barrels of canned goods and water some people had. It just felt like the ultimate threat back then.
It's a powerful memory for a lot of people. That fear of nuclear annihilation really loomed large. But if you look at the landscape of global risks today, well, the primary danger has arguably shifted.
It really has, hasn't it? Because when you actually dig into the data, the biggest global threat, it's not that mushroom cloud anymore. It's something microscopic, yet potentially far more devastating. A highly infectious virus.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at projections, serious ones, of over 10 million deaths in the coming decades. It's chilling.
Absolutely chilling. And what's really striking, is the imbalance in how we prepare.
How so?
Well, we've invested massively trillions in nuclear deterrence, this hugely complex system to prevent one kind of cataclysm.
Right, aimed at preventing the hopefully unthinkable.
Exactly. Yet, the investment in systems to stop the very real and frankly statistically more likely threat of global epidemics, it's been comparatively tiny. It leaves us, alarmingly vulnerable.
It's almost a paradox, isn't it? This intricate setup for nuclear war versus, not much for pandemics. And the Ebola outbreak a few years back really threw this into sharp relief for you, didn't it?
It certainly did. Trying to track Ebola's spread using fundamentally the same kind of case analysis tools we use for polio eradication, that was a stark awakening.
Wow.
What became clear wasn't just that our systems were insufficient, it was that in several key areas, effective systems simply didn't exist at all.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. When Ebola hit, what were some of the fundamental things, the tools or systems, that were just glaringly absent?
Yeah.
Where were the biggest gaps?
Well, okay, consider this. There was no standing team, readily deployable epidemiologists ready to go in, track, and analyze the spread quickly.
No rapid response disease detected.
Pretty much. Case reports were largely paper-based. Think about that. Paper.
In this day and age.
Yeah. This meant critical early data was often weeks behind what was actually happening on the ground. That lag, it can be the difference between containment and, widespread contagion. Like fighting a fire but only getting reports of where the flames are weeks late.
Okay, so no rapid intel gathering. And it wasn't just about understanding the spread, was it? What about the actual medical teams needed?
Precisely. There were no pre-assembled, fully trained teams of medical workers on standby, ready to deploy immediately. Now, don't get me wrong, organizations like Doctors Without Borders did heroic work mobilizing volunteers.
So absolutely heroic.
But the process itself was inherently slow. In a major pandemic, a fast-moving one, we'd need hundreds of thousands of specialized people ready to go instantly.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
That really puts the potential scale in perspective.
It does. We have these meticulously planned rapid response protocols for military threats. Why haven't we applied that same strategic thinking to biological ones?
Good question. And you also mentioned a lack of on-the-ground leadership and coordination.
Yes. There was a real shortage of personnel there in the affected areas, with the expertise to oversee treatment, make sure the right diagnostics were being used, figure out the best containment strategies. Basic command and control for an effective response, it was often missing.
Sounds like, a deeply disorganized situation in places. And you've also talked about missed opportunities, particularly with Ebola survivors.
Yeah, this is fascinating and frankly, quite troubling. Even seemingly straightforward things, potential lifesavers, weren't really done at scale.
Like what?
Like systematically collecting blood from people who survived Ebola. Their blood contained antibodies, potentially forming an immune serum to treat others.
Convalescent serum, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it happened in a very limited, patchy way. It was honestly a global scale failure to use a readily available resource that could have saved lives.
It's almost hard to believe, with all our science, these fundamental pieces were missing. And you pointed out something striking about the WHO having research funds, but not necessarily the resources for that active on-the-ground monitoring.
That's a critical gap. There's a big difference between funding research in a lab, which is vital, of course, and funding the ability to detect and respond to threats out in the real world, in real time.
A disconnect between knowing and doing.
It is, and it's a world away from what you see in Hollywood, isn't it? Those movies with the always ready, super effective team swooping in.
Right, the movie version where everything works flawlessly.
That narrative just doesn't match the reality we faced or the reality we might face again.
Okay, so the reality as you're laying it out is that this basic lack of preparedness could make the next outbreak dramatically worse than Ebola. Just to remind everyone, what was the rough toll of that outbreak?
The Ebola outbreak tragically led to about 10,000 deaths, and the vast majority, almost all of them, were concentrated in just 3 West African countries.
Okay, but it didn't spread globally in the way it could have. Why not?
Right. It's crucial to understand why it didn't spread more widely. There were basically 3 main reasons.
Okay, what were those factors that thankfully helped contain it?
Firstly, just the incredible, brave, relentless efforts of the local health workers. Identifying cases, tracing contacts, working tirelessly. They were the true heroes.
Absolutely, on the front lines.
Secondly, the nature of the Ebola virus itself. It's not airborne, which is huge.
Right.
And usually by the time someone is highly contagious, they're already severely ill, often bedridden, largely immobile. That limits casual spread.
So not easily passed through the air or by someone just walking around feeling a bit off. And the third reason...
Plain luck, unfortunately.
Luck.
Yeah. Ebola didn't really get a strong foothold in major, densely populated urban centers. If it had, the numbers could have been exponentially higher. And the key point, the one to really remember, is we absolutely cannot rely on luck next time.
That is a sobering thought, especially when you think how easily viruses can spread now. Someone asymptomatic on a plane, global markets.
Exactly. The pathways are there. And the next outbreak, it could be natural, like Ebola, maybe jumping from animals, or it could even be deliberate. Bioterrorism.
That adds another layer of concern.
It does. The potential for rapid, widespread escalation is just. It's immense in our connected world.
And to really hammer home the potential devastation, you often bring up the 1918 Spanish flu. That was a catastrophe on a totally different level, wasn't it?
It really was. The Spanish flu was an airborne virus. It spread with terrifying speed across the globe, infected a huge portion of the world's population, and caused over 30 million deaths. Some estimates are even higher.
30 million.
That's the kind of scale we're talking about with a truly uncontained pandemic. This isn't just some theoretical exercise. It's a critical issue. It demands our attention. Serious attention. Now.
But it's not all doom and gloom, right?
Yeah.
Because you've also stressed that we can build effective systems. We actually have the capacity, the science, the tech. It exists.
Absolutely. That's the crucial, hopeful part. We have remarkable tools available right now.
Such as?
Well, think about mobile phones. Almost everyone has one. They can be incredible tools for getting public health info out fast, and even for people reporting symptoms or potential outbreaks back in real time.
Two-way communication.
Exactly. Then there's satellite imagery. We can use it to track population movements, understand how people might be migrating, what density is changing.
Seeing the bigger picture.
Right. And perhaps most importantly, the incredible speed of advances in biology. We can identify pathogens faster than ever, and the science for creating targeted drugs and vaccines quickly is moving at an unbelievable pace.
So the foundational tools, the building blocks, they're there. But the crucial step, as you keep saying, is integrating them, making them part of a global health system, and being prepared.
Yes. Integrated into a system, and crucially, into a state of constant proactive preparedness.
You often use the analogy with military readiness. Can you explain why that comparison is so relevant here?
I think the military analogy is incredibly insightful. Think about it. We maintain standing armies, always ready. We have specialized rapid response units, fully equipped, constantly training.
Reserves, logistics.
Sophisticated logistics, yes. Global reach. And we conduct frequent war games, simulations to make sure personnel are trained, supply chains work, communication lines are clear, radio frequencies are sorted. We need that same level of unwavering, proactive readiness for epidemics.
The same seriousness, the same planning.
Why wouldn't we apply the same rigorous approach? Protecting ourselves from biological threats is just as vital, arguably more likely day to day than military ones.
Okay, so if we were serious about building this kind of robust preparedness system, what would the key components be? What are the absolute essentials?
Okay, first, we absolutely must invest in building strong hospital and basic public health systems everywhere, particularly in lower-income countries.
Foundations.
Exactly. These systems need to handle routine things well, like safe childbirth, childhood vaccinations, but crucially, they also act as our eyes and ears on the ground, the tripwires. They're best placed to spot unusual disease patterns early.
So strong local health systems globally. What's next?
Second, we need a standing global reserve, a medical reserve corps, if you will. Highly trained, experienced medical and public health professionals ready to deploy anywhere instantly.
Specialists.
Yes, not just general doctors. We need epidemiologists, virologists, infectious disease experts, logisticians, public health communication experts, a dedicated specialized force.
That sort of global health rapid response team. How would that work with, say, the military or other groups?
Critically, this reserve needs to be seamlessly integrated with military capabilities for transport, for logistics, potentially even for helping implement effective quarantines if needed, rapidly and safely.
Leveraging their logistical power.
The military has resources, planning capacity, and speed that civilian health groups often just don't have at that scale.
Makes sense. You also stressed simulations earlier.
Yes, absolutely vital. Just like war games test military plans, we need regular, realistic simulations of germ outbreaks.
Germ games.
Call them that, sure. They expose the weaknesses, the bottlenecks, where coordination fails, where training is needed. The last major U.S. simulation, back in 2001, I think, showed major shortcomings. It basically told us currently, humanity loses against a serious pandemic. We need to run these games until we know we can win.
So these simulations are like stress tests for our global health security. And obviously, research is key too.
Absolutely essential. We need much more R&D investment, sustained investment in rapid diagnostics, knowing what we're fighting quickly, and in broadly effective vaccines and treatments.
Platforms that can be adapted quickly.
Exactly. Things like the fast-acting adenovirus vaccine work, that's a great example of the kind of breakthrough potential we should be aiming for across the board.
Yeah, this all sounds incredibly important and, well, necessary. But the big question always comes down to cost.
Yeah.
What are we talking about financially to build this?
It's hard to put an exact global price tag on it, it's complex, but what's unequivocally clear is this. The cost of preparedness is tiny compared to the cost of not being prepared.
The cost of failure.
Exactly. The World Bank estimated a severe global flu pandemic could wipe out over $3 trillion in global wealth. Trillion. Plus the millions and millions of lives lost.
On an unimaginable cost.
So this investment in prevention, it's essentially an insurance policy against utter catastrophe, and a very affordable one, relatively speaking.
That really puts it in perspective. And you've also argued this investment isn't just about pandemics, right? It has broader benefits.
Precisely. That's a key point. When you invest in strengthening health systems in developing countries, when you boost R&D, when you build these global response networks, you improve everyday primary care.
Better health overall.
Yes. You accelerate scientific discovery generally, you create jobs, and ultimately you contribute to greater global health equity. It helps build a safer, fairer, more just world for everyone, not just protecting us from the next big one.
So it's really an investment in global well-being on multiple levels. A powerful way to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, to sort of bring this part of our deep dive towards a close, what's the core message, the main thing you want listeners to take away?
I think the main message is urgency, but not panic. You don't need to go hoard canned goods or hide in the basement like we worried about with nuclear war.
Right.
But we do need to recognize that time isn't on our side here. We need action. Proactive, decisive, global action, and we need it now. Ebola was a wake-up call, a really stark one.
An alarm bell.
It was. And if we actually heed that call, if we commit now to building these systems we've talked about, we genuinely have a chance to be ready for the next epidemic, whenever it comes.
A really crucial message indeed. So as we reflect on all this, the real threat, our current lack of readiness, but also the clear path forward, it leaves us with a pretty profound question to think about, doesn't it?
It does. What are the truly far-reaching implications, maybe even destabilizing ones, of our current unpreparedness? Thinking about global security, our interconnected world, consider both natural outbreaks and, yes, the potential for bioterrorism. And maybe more hopefully, how can better international collaboration and maybe a stronger sense of individual and governmental responsibility help us build a genuinely more resilient future?